Welcome and salam sejahtera I bid to our respected panelists. Today, me and my partner will be presenting on our research, which is Living Wages in Malaysia, the Sustainability Among Fresh Graduates in Klang Valley, which was supervised by Encik Mujibu Abdul Muiz.
Assalamualaikum, my name is Rafati Fatiha and today I will be explaining on the research background. According to Hirschman 2021, labour forces are mostly conquered by people who are the age between 25 years old to 29, as it is considered as the largest group that is actively working and searching for jobs in Malaysia. Living wages and minimum wages are distinct from each other, however, it is still interrelated. Living wages is wages that is enough to meet the basic needs and necessities to sustain the individual livelihood. And also, living wages also depends on the inflation-adjusted employee pays and varies from employees' marital status, family dependencies, spending habits, financial education, and location, whether it's urban areas or rural areas. Due to the pandemic, the competition in the labour markets has increased, which resulted in fresh graduates to accept any job opportunities with any payment to support the well-being of individuals despite having a high qualification. Things that need to be taken into consideration when discussing about living wages of fresh graduates in Klang Valley is the different genders, type of transportation use, housing areas, utilities, personal cares, social participation, education loans, healthcare, underlying expenses and savings. The implementation of living wages in Malaysia could help to enhance the effectiveness of individuals in labour markets, as it will help fresh graduates to find employment, which could enhance their knowledge and also experiences.
According to KWSP under Belanjawanku 2019, Malaysians who are unmarried and rely on public transportation rent a room in the Klang Valley and do not save require RM1,600 a month. This number comprises the cost of basic necessities, social participation and discretionary spending. According to the Statistics Department 2021, new graduates who entered the job market last year received lower beginning wages than those who entered the market the year before. The majority of degree graduates who entered the labour market last year got estimated monthly pay of between RM1,000 to RM1,500. It is a significant decrease from average wage of RM2,000 to RM2,500 reported in 2019. Despite the fact that it is a step in the right direction, economists argue that RM1,200 minimum wage is still too low when compared to the projected living wage, particularly for people who live in metropolitan areas such as Klang Valley, and it should be increased. Based on the reading that has been done under this research, it aims to explore the contributing factors of acceptable living wage in Malaysia to help fresh graduates to sustain in Klang Valley.
To have a more deeper understanding of the sustainability among fresh graduates in Klang Valley, the following research question has been created to answer the research objectives. Firstly, what is the sustainability of fresh graduates in Klang Valley with the average living wages in Malaysia? Second, what is the relationship between the knowledge on financial education and the sustainability of fresh graduates living in Klang Valley? Third, what is the relationship between the fresh graduates who have a bad spending habits and the sustainability of fresh graduates living in Klang Valley? And fourth, what is the relationship between the fresh graduates who live with their families and the sustainabilities of fresh graduates living in Klang Valley? The research objective that is aimed to achieve in this research is to identify the level of sustainability of fresh graduates in Klang Valley with the average living wages in Malaysia. Second, to identify the relationship between financial education and the sustainability of fresh graduates living in Klang Valley based on the living wages in Malaysia. And third, to identify the relationship between spending habits and the sustainability of fresh graduates living in Klang Valley based on the living wages in Malaysia. And lastly, to identify the relationship between family dependency and the sustainability of fresh graduates living in Klang Valley based on the living wages in Malaysia. The conceptual framework is aimed to determine whether there is a direct relationship between independent variables, which are the financial education, spending habits and family dependency, with the dependent variable, which is the sustainability of fresh graduates in Klang Valley. To explain further on the sustainability of fresh graduates, it is determined based on the factors that are financial education, spending habits and family dependency. Sustainability in the sense is that the fresh graduates could afford to live a life comfortably without having any financial constraints. Secondly, financial literacy is needed to enhance the knowledge of fresh graduates on paying income tax, prioritizing on paying off debts and loans, and also having to make a thorough monthly budget. Different people have different spending habits. Some people have to pay off education debts, loan for cars, houses, utility bills, transportation, and also to the point of eating out are some of the reasons to determine the spending habits of the individual. The definition of family dependency is where an individual is dependent on the family in terms of basic necessities and other relevant spending. If individuals are leaning towards family dependency, it would be easier for the individuals to sustain in a month as everything is provided by the family.
There are three independent variables and hypotheses. The first one is financial education. The rationale is there is no relationship between financial education and sustainability among fresh graduates in Klang Valley. The H1 is there is a significant positive relationship between financial education and sustainability among fresh graduates in Klang Valley. The second independent variables is spending habits, which is the rationale is there is no relationship between spending habits and sustainability among fresh graduates in Klang Valley. The H1 is there is a significant positive relationship between spending habits and sustainability among fresh graduates in Klang Valley. The third independent variables is family dependency. The rationale is there is no relationship between family dependency and sustainability among fresh graduates in Klang Valley. The H1 is there is a significant positive relationship between family dependency and sustainability among fresh graduates in Klang Valley.
In order to achieve this study objective, a cross-sectional approach utilizing quantitative approaches would be used in this research. A quantitative survey can be assist in increasing the number of sample sizes. An online cross-sectional survey will be utilized to collect data at a given period in order to achieve all of the research objective. Next, the unit of analysis is the fresh graduates that are currently residing and working in Klang Valley. And thirdly, the formula proposed by Kritzi and Morgan 1970 was used to determine the sample sizes, and based on the Ministry of Education 2019, the number of fresh graduates employment is 56,739 individuals based on Kuala Lumpur, Selangor and Putrajaya. Thus, the sample sizes needed for the study is 520 respondents. For the study on sampling techniques, the researcher will be able to select the respondents who will be able to engage in the online survey based on their own choices. The questionnaires will be distributed to fresh graduates in Klang Valley through online platforms such as Twitter, Instagram and LinkedIn. The measurement instruments used in the study was divided into 5 sections. Firstly is section A, which contains the respondents' background information. Next, the financial well-being scale. Third section is the financial stress scale. Section D is spending habits and responsibility scale. And lastly, section E is the family dependency. Likert scale is employed as the measurement scale for all variables, so that respondents were asked to rate how strongly they agreed or disagreed with things on the 5-point scale.
Based on the researcher finding, about 275 were male, which is equivalent to 50.4%. Next, according to the respondent age, there are 259 respondents from 27 to 30 years old, which is equivalent to 47.4% answering these questionnaires. In addition, in terms of ethnicity, there are 452 respondents. There are Malay, which is 82.8%. For marital status is 345 respondents are single, which is 63.2%. Lastly, for the residential area, there were about 368 respondents living in Selangor, which is 67.4%.
According to CFI Team 2021, descriptive statistic is used to help in visualizing the data for the readers to understand in a way that is easier and understandable. Based on the table shown, it could be seen that the mean for the sustainability of fresh graduates in Klang Valley, which is the dependent variable, is 3.0806, which is considered in a moderate level. To measure the 3 categories of low, moderate and high, the researcher would minus the maximum and minimum value and would then divide into 3, which is based on the categories. The answers will be 1.25, which is in the lower category. Seen based on the table of strengths of relationship and correlation coefficient that more than 1 indicate a strong relationship, 0.5 to 1 a high degree, 0.3 to 0.49 is a moderate degree, 0.2 indicates a low degree of relationship, and lastly 0 means no correlation. Research objective 2 is to identify relationship between financial education and the sustainability of fresh graduates living in Klang Valley based on the living wages in Malaysia. Hypothesis 1 is there is a positive relationship between financial education and the sustainability of fresh graduates living in Klang Valley based on the living wages in Malaysia. According to the table shown, it can be seen that there is a positive relationship between the financial education and sustainability of fresh graduates living in Klang Valley based on the living wages in Malaysia, as R equals to negative 0.164 P equals to 0.0000, which means that P is less than 0.05, thus H1 is accepted. Research objective 3 is to identify the relationship between the spending habits and the sustainability of fresh graduates living in Klang Valley based on the living wages in Malaysia. H1, there is a positive relationship between the spending habits and the sustainability of fresh graduates living in Klang Valley based on the living wages in Malaysia. It is illustrated on the table above that there is a positive relationship between spending habits and the sustainability of fresh graduates living in Klang Valley based on the living wages in Malaysia, which is R equals to 0.423 and P equals to 0.00, which means that P is lower than 0.05. Thus, the relationship between spending habits of the fresh graduates in Klang Valley and the sustainability is to a moderate degree, and H1 is accepted. The last research objective is to identify the relationship between family dependency and the sustainability of fresh graduates living in Klang Valley based on the living wages in Malaysia. H1, that there is a positive relationship between family dependency and the sustainability of fresh graduates living in Klang Valley based on the living wages in Malaysia. The table that is stated above is demonstrated a positive relationship between family dependency by the fresh graduates and the sustainability of fresh graduates living in Klang Valley based on the living wages in Malaysia, which means that R is equal to negative 0.188, P is equal to 0.000, which means that P is less than 0.05. Hence, H1 is accepted and H0 is rejected. For the recommendation, the government should take initiative to take charge on implementing minimum wages based on each state. According to Jason and Rosie Han 2022, the minimum wage of the country should reflect the cost of living of each state. Due to the living cost of Klang Valley that is very high, fresh graduates tend to suffer the most, which could lead to urban poverty. The main reasons for the people to move from the rural areas to the urban areas is for a higher quality of life, but with the wages that are just on the average scale, is just minimum acceptable in Klang Valley. Second recommendation is for the employers to give out more benefits on social participation and social security. Inspirational income is what is dreamt of by every fresh graduate, but in reality, Malaysia is far from giving on high of an income, especially for fresh graduates. According to Aileen and Farina 2018, in this booming economy, most people recognize that the minimum living standards are way beyond affording basic necessities. It would also include non-wage benefits and social assistance. Lastly, the government and employers working hand in hand with the United Nations. The United Nations Global Compact has emphasized on the living wages from all across the country. According to the United Nations Global Compact 2022, working poverty is a problem that the whole world has to face. By having a pandemic after the pandemic hits, it does not mean that the people in poverty will get out of poverty. Living wages in Malaysia do not mean that the fresh graduates will have a decent lifestyle. By working together with the United Nations, the government and employer would have the ability to protect and respect human rights, especially for the fresh graduates who are trying to live a decent life.
Data collection was one of the study's primary constraints. Even if the COVID-19 epidemic ends, the researcher must follow several restrictions. That's why data collecting is a challenge. The researcher must survey all Klang Valley new grads for the study. Since the pandemic is growing in Malaysia, researcher must adjust how they distribute questions to respondents to follow all the standard operating procedures required during this pandemic to break the chain of COVID-19. The researcher may now utilize a Google form to send the surveys. The researcher cannot offer it face-to-face because of the outbreak. Modern technology allows you to distribute a Google form questionnaires through Instagram and Twitter. Face-to-face data collection is more convenient but takes longer. For the future study, the researcher may choose a form other than Google form that allows respondents to answer freely in a long-term research paper improvement. Limited answer. This study researcher were limited in their reply because it was employed an online survey. Due to the pandemic COVID-19, researchers cannot help respondents face-to-face. Instead, they will share the online survey form in a WhatsApp group or others. Due to these unwanted behaviors, the same student may answer the questionnaire again. Repetitive reaction may cause unwanted behavior. This is because student answer may change if they took the survey many times. A student may choose agree on the first attempt and then disagree on the second attempt. For the future suggestion, the researcher may create a monitoring system to track whether a respondent doesn't grasp the question or needs assistance. Even the online questionnaire, the researcher may aid them and make the respondent feel comfortable to answer the question. lack of time. Researchers who cannot assess the data, they need typically miss the deadline. Each activity has a time limit, so the student need to submit the assignment on time. Everyone in the research has a deadline. Time constraint might hinder the research. Give the researcher time for the future recommendation. With enough time, the researcher may get many replies and collect more information. It helps the researcher create research paper, more ideas. In conclusion, the research studied the sustainability of Klang Valley new graduates based on livable salaries. Klang Valley has greater living costs than many other locations, thus graduates go there to improve their standard of life. Living wages merely cover the minimal cost of living and don't provide enough for comfort. Financial education, spending habits and family dependence might affect recent graduate sustainability. Fresh graduates with financial literacy are more educated about paying taxes and setting a monthly budget, which impact the sustainability. Positive result were also found. The more new graduates spend, the less they can sustain each month. The variables are correlated. When young graduates rely on their families for more basic needs, they can survive on livable wages. The Malaysian government must handle this problem since it will damage the community and economy in the future.